The autumn morning mist clung to the grounds of Windsor Castle as Zara Tindall walked purposefully through the private gardens, her footsteps echoing softly on the damp stone pathways. In her hands, she carried a weathered leather jewelry box that had remained unopened for nearly 2 years, hidden away in the depths of her grandmother's private safe. The weight of it seemed to grow heavier with each step, not because of the precious contents within, but because of the significance of what she was about to do. Zara had always been different from her cousins. While William and Harry grew up under the intense scrutiny of being direct heirs to the throne, and, while the York princesses navigated their own unique positions in the royal hierarchy, Zara had enjoyed a freedom that came with being slightly removed from the direct line of succession. Her mother, Princess Anne, had famously refused royal titles for her children, believing they would be better served by making their own way in the world. This decision had given Zara the liberty to pursue her Olympic equestrian career and speak her mind in ways that other royals simply couldn't. But, today, that same independence that had shaped her entire life was about to be put to its greatest test. Today, she was going to defy not just royal protocol, but the explicit wishes of the current queen consort. And she was going to do it in honor of a woman who had been more than a grandmother to her, more than a queen to her country. She was going to honor Queen Elizabeth II in the way she believed her grandmother would have wanted most. The previous evening, Zara had received an unexpected call from Catherine, Princess of Wales. Catherine's voice had carried a note of excitement mixed with nervous anticipation as she explained that she would be visiting Windsor for a private memorial service, a small gathering to mark what would have been the Queen's 99th birthday. The family had decided to keep the occasion intimate, just close relatives and a few longtime staff members who had served the Queen for decades. But, as they spoke, Catherine had mentioned something that made Zara's heart race. She had referenced a conversation she'd had with Prince William about family heirlooms, about pieces of jewelry that seemed to have disappeared from the royal collection after the Queen's death. Catherine had spoken carefully, diplomatically, but Zara could hear the underlying question. Where were the Queen Mother's most precious pieces? Where were the jewels that Queen Elizabeth II had treasured not for their monetary value, but for their deep personal significance? Zara knew exactly where they were, because she had been entrusted with them. 3 days after her grandmother's funeral, when the initial chaos of grief and ceremony had begun to settle, Zara had received a call from the Queen's private secretary. There was something Her Majesty had left specifically for Zara, something that needed to be collected personally and discreetly. When Zara had arrived at Buckingham Palace, she had been led not to one of the grand state rooms, but to the Queen's private study, a cozy space filled with family photographs and personal mementos. There, waiting for her, had been the elderly private secretary who had served the Queen for over 30 years. In his hands was the leather jewelry box, along with a sealed envelope bearing Zara's name and her grandmother's distinctive handwriting. The secretary had explained that the Queen had left specific instructions about these particular pieces, instructions that were to be followed to the letter, regardless of any other claims or expectations. Zara had taken the box and the letter home that day, but she hadn't opened either. The grief was still too fresh, the loss too overwhelming. She had placed them in her own safe, planning to deal with them when she felt strong enough. Days had turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still the box remained unopened. It wasn't until Catherine's phone call that Zara realized the time had finally come to honor her grandmother's wishes. The letter had been everything Zara expected and nothing she was prepared for. Written in her grandmother's careful script, it began with the kind of loving words that Queen Elizabeth II reserved for her most cherished family members. But, as Zara read on, she understood that this was more than a grandmother's loving message to her granddaughter. This was a strategic directive from a queen who had spent 7 decades understanding the intricate dynamics of royal life. The jewelry box contained pieces that most people had assumed would automatically pass to Queen Camilla as the new queen consort. There was the Queen Mother's sapphire and diamond suite, including a breathtaking necklace that had been a wedding gift from King George VI. There were emerald earrings that had belonged to Queen Mary, passed down through generations of royal women. Most significantly, there was a stunning pearl and diamond tiara that had been the Queen Mother's personal favorite, worn at countless state occasions and family celebrations. But, according to the letter, Queen Elizabeth II had different plans for these treasures. She had watched Catherine's grace and dedication during her years as a working royal. She had seen how William's wife had embraced her role with dignity and genuine care for the people she served. Most importantly, she had witnessed how Catherine had honored royal traditions while bringing her own authentic warmth to the role. The Queen's letter explained that these particular pieces had always been intended for the future Queen, not necessarily the current Queen consort. They were investments in the monarchy's future, symbols of continuity that should pass to the woman who would one day reign alongside a future king. Queen Elizabeth II had made this decision during the final months of her life, when she was thinking carefully about legacy and the long-term stability of the institution she had served for so long. But there was more to the letter than just the disposition of jewelry. The Queen had also written about family dynamics, about the delicate balance between honoring the present and preparing for the future. She had specifically requested that Zara be the one to present these pieces to Catherine, not through official channels or ceremonial occasions, but in a personal, intimate moment that would emphasize the love and trust behind the gesture. Reading between the lines, Zara understood what her grandmother was really asking her to do. She was asking her to navigate a situation that could potentially create significant tension within the royal family. Queen Camilla had reasonable expectations about inheriting the Queen Mother's jewelry collection. She had been Queen Consort for nearly 2 years, and these pieces would have been appropriate additions to her official collection. By bypassing Camilla entirely and ensuring these pieces went directly to Catherine, the late Queen was making a statement about her vision for the monarchy's future. As Zara approached the private entrance to Windsor Castle, she reflected on the courage her grandmother had always shown in making difficult decisions. Queen Elizabeth II had spent her entire reign balancing competing interests, managing family dynamics, and making choices that served the greater good of the monarchy, even when those choices were personally difficult. Now she was asking Zara to show that same kind of courage. The security guard at the entrance recognized Zara immediately and waved her through with a respectful nod. She made her way through the familiar corridors, past portraits of ancestors and rooms filled with centuries of royal history. Each step brought back memories of childhood visits, of Christmas celebrations, of quiet moments with her grandmother when the weight of the crown seemed to disappear and she was simply a loving grandmother sharing stories with her granddaughter. Catherine was waiting in the blue drawing room, one of the Queen's favorite informal reception spaces. She looked elegant as always, dressed in a navy dress that was appropriate for the somber occasion while still reflecting her impeccable sense of style. But Zara could see the curiosity and slight nervousness in Catherine's eyes. She clearly sensed that this meeting was about more than just a family gathering. Zara had always admired Catherine's grace under pressure. From the moment she had entered the royal family, Catherine had faced intense scrutiny and endless speculation about her every choice. She had handled it all with a dignity that reminded many observers of the late Queen herself. But, more than that, Catherine had brought genuine warmth and relatability to her royal role. She connected with people in a way that felt authentic rather than performed. As they embraced in greeting, Zara felt the weight of the jewelry box in her arms and the significance of the moment. She was about to fulfill her grandmother's final wish regarding these precious family heirlooms, but she was also about to step into a potential storm of family politics and media speculation. Catherine's eyes immediately went to the box in Zara's hands. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a mixture of anticipation and concern. Zara nodded, setting the box carefully on a nearby table. "Grandmother left specific instructions," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion she felt building. "These were meant for you, Catherine. Not eventually, not through official channels, but now. She wanted you to have them." Catherine's hand went to her throat in a gesture of surprise and emotion. "But surely these should go to Camilla? I mean, protocol would suggest." "Grandmother was very clear about protocol," Zara interrupted gently. "She understood it better than anyone. But she also understood something more important. She understood the future of the monarchy, and she wanted these pieces to be where they would serve that future best." As Zara opened the ancient leather box, Catherine gasped audibly. Even in the soft morning light filtering through the drawing room windows, the jewels seemed to capture and amplify every ray, throwing tiny rainbows across the walls. But, more than their beauty, these pieces carried the weight of history and the love of a grandmother who had thought carefully about legacy. Zara lifted out the Queen Mother's sapphire necklace, its deep blue stones seeming to hold the depth of ocean waters. This was her favorite, she explained, remembering countless occasions when she had seen her great-grandmother wearing this very piece. She wore it to her own daughter's coronation, and to dozens of state dinners and royal celebrations after that. Catherine reached out tentatively, her fingers trembling slightly as they touched the cool metal and warm stones. "I can't believe she wanted me to have these. I feel so honored, but also so overwhelmed by the responsibility." "That's exactly why she chose you," Zara replied with a smile that carried both sadness and pride. Grandmother always said that the best people for important responsibilities are the ones who understand the weight of them. As Catherine carefully lifted the necklace, holding it up to catch the light, both women felt the presence of the remarkable woman who had made this moment possible. Queen Elizabeth II had spent her life making decisions that would benefit the monarchy long after her own reign ended. This gift to Catherine was perhaps one of her most personal and meaningful legacies, a gesture of love and confidence that transcended protocol and politics. But, even as they shared this beautiful moment, both women knew that the real challenge was yet to come. When news of this transfer became known, as it inevitably would in the interconnected world of the royal family, there would be questions, speculation, and, potentially some very difficult conversations. Queen Camilla would eventually learn that pieces she might have expected to inherit had gone elsewhere, and that knowledge could create ripples throughout the carefully balanced dynamics of royal life. However, for now, in this quiet drawing room at Windsor Castle, with the morning light streaming through windows that had witnessed centuries of royal history, there was only the beauty of one queen's love for another, and the trust that bound generations of royal women together in an unbroken chain of service, sacrifice, and hope for the future. The weight of the Queen Mother's emerald earrings in Catherine's palm felt like holding pieces of living history. Each stone had been carefully selected by Queen Mary herself in 1923, crafted by Garrett into a design that had become legendary among royal jewelry enthusiasts. But, as Catherine examined their intricate beauty, her mind raced with the implications of what was happening in this quiet drawing room. Zara watched Catherine's face carefully, seeing the mix of wonder and worry that crossed her features. She understood exactly what Catherine was feeling. When her grandmother had first explained this plan in her letter, Zara had experienced the same combination of honor and anxiety. These weren't just beautiful objects. They were symbols of royal authority, pieces that carried expectations and responsibilities that extended far beyond their monetary value. "Tell me about the letter," Catherine said softly, setting the earrings down with careful precision. "What exactly did she say?" Zara reached into her purse and withdrew the envelope, its royal seal still intact after all these months. She had memorized every word of her grandmother's message, but she wanted Catherine to understand the full context of what the Queen had written. She wrote this during her final weeks. I think she knew she was running out of time to ensure certain things were properly arranged. Catherine took the letter with reverence, understanding that she was about to read some of the last personal thoughts of one of history's most remarkable monarchs. As she unfolded the cream-colored paper, she immediately recognized the distinctive handwriting that had signed countless official documents, personal letters, and Christmas cards over 7 decades of reign. The letter began with typical royal formality, but it quickly became deeply personal. Queen Elizabeth II had written about watching Catherine grow into her royal role, about seeing her navigate the challenges of public life with grace and authenticity. She had noted Catherine's particular gift for connecting with people from all walks of life, her ability to make others feel seen and valued. Most significantly, she had written about Catherine's understanding of service, not as obligation but as genuine care for others. But the Queen had also been remarkably candid about family dynamics. She had acknowledged that her decision regarding these particular pieces might create some tension, but she had been clear about her reasoning. The monarchy's future stability depended not just on following tradition, but on making thoughtful decisions about how traditions evolved. These jewelry pieces represented more than personal adornment. They were tools of soft diplomacy, symbols of continuity, and investments in public perception of the royal family. Reading between the carefully chosen words, Catherine began to understand the strategic thinking behind her grandmother-in-law's decision. Queen Elizabeth II had witnessed decades of public fascination with royal jewelry, had seen how particular pieces could capture imagination and create positive associations with the monarchy. She had also observed how certain jewelry choices could send powerful messages about unity, tradition, and the values the royal family represented. The Queen Mother's collection held special significance because of its association with one of the most beloved figures in modern royal history. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, had been adored by the British public, seen as a symbol of resilience during World War II and grace during times of change. Her jewelry had been photographed at countless memorable occasions, creating a visual legacy that was deeply embedded in public consciousness. By ensuring these pieces went to Catherine rather than following automatic protocol, Queen Elizabeth II was making a statement about her vision for the monarchy's future. She was investing in the woman who would one day be queen, ensuring that Catherine would have access to jewelry that would enhance her ability to represent the crown effectively. It was a decision based on long-term thinking rather than short-term protocol. As Catherine finished reading the letter, she looked up at Zara with tears in her eyes. She really thought all this through, didn't she? Every detail, every possible consequence. Zara nodded, feeling her own emotions rising. That was grandmother. She never made important decisions lightly. She understood that everything she did would have ripple effects for years to come. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, both women processing the magnitude of what was happening. Outside the windows, they could hear the distant sounds of the castle's daily operations, the quiet efficiency that kept one of the world's most famous residences functioning. But, inside this room, time seemed suspended as they honored the wishes of a queen who had shaped both their lives in profound ways. Catherine carefully refolded the letter and handed it back to Zara. What happens now? I mean, practically speaking. These pieces, they'll need to be officially documented, won't they? And, people will notice when I wear them. Zara had been thinking about exactly these questions since receiving Catherine's phone call. Grandmother anticipated that too. She left instructions with her private secretary about the proper documentation. As far as official records are concerned, these pieces were always intended for the future queen. The transfer is completely legitimate. But, both women knew that legitimacy and family harmony weren't necessarily the same thing. Queen Camilla had been patient and gracious during her years as queen consort, carefully establishing her own relationship with the royal jewelry collection. She had access to magnificent pieces, including some of Queen Elizabeth II's personal favorites. But, the Queen Mother's collection had always been considered something special, a treasure trove that would naturally pass to the next queen consort. Have you spoken to William about this? Catherine asked, unconsciously twisting her wedding ring as she often did when she was thinking through complex situations. Not yet, Zara admitted. Grandmother asked me to handle this personally, to make sure you understood the full context before anyone else became involved. But, she also made it clear that William should be informed soon after. She didn't want there to be any secrets or surprises that could damage family relationships. Catherine appreciated this consideration. Her marriage to William had been strengthened by their commitment to open communication, especially about matters that could affect their royal duties or family dynamics. She knew he would understand the honor behind his grandmother's gesture, but she also knew he would worry about potential complications. Zara lifted another piece from the jewelry box, this one perhaps the most significant of all. The Queen Mother's pearl and diamond tiara caught the morning light like a crown of stars, its design both classical and timeless. This was the piece that would generate the most attention when Catherine eventually wore it, the piece that would most clearly signal the transfer of royal authority and expectation. This one was her absolute favorite, Zara said, holding the tiara with careful hands. She wore it to almost every major state occasion for 30 years. The public associates it completely with her memory. Catherine stared at the tiara, overwhelmed by its beauty and its history. She could imagine the Queen Mother wearing it to state dinners, royal weddings, and ceremonial occasions that had defined decades of British royal life. The idea that she would now be responsible for carrying on that legacy felt both thrilling and terrifying. I keep thinking about the photographs, Catherine said quietly. All those iconic images of her wearing these pieces. How can I possibly live up to that standard? Zara smiled, remembering similar conversations she had had with her grandmother over the years. She used to say that the jewelry doesn't make the woman royal. The woman makes the jewelry royal. These pieces were beautiful when they sat in display cases, but they became legendary when she wore them with confidence and grace. As if to prove the point, Zara carefully lifted the sapphire necklace and held it up to Catherine's neckline. Even without proper lighting or formal attire, the effect was stunning. The deep blue stone seemed to enhance Catherine's natural coloring, while the classic design complemented her timeless sense of style. It was as if the pieces had been waiting for exactly this moment, for exactly this person. We should probably think about timing, Catherine said, her practical nature asserting itself even in the midst of such an emotional moment. When should I first wear these pieces? And how do we handle the inevitable questions about where they came from? Zara had given this considerable thought as well. Grandmother suggested that the first occasion should be something personally meaningful rather than a major state event. Maybe a family celebration or a smaller royal engagement. Something that would allow the focus to be on the beauty and history of the pieces rather than on any political implications. They both knew that the royal family's media team would need to be prepared for questions about the jewelry's provenance. The story would need to be told carefully, emphasizing the late Queen's personal decision and her love for Catherine while avoiding any suggestion that protocol had been violated or that other family members had been slighted. Catherine picked up the emerald earrings again, holding them up to catch the light. "I want to wear these first," she decided. "Something about them feels right for beginning this new responsibility." Zara nodded approvingly. The emerald earrings were stunning but slightly less prominent than the tiara or the sapphire necklace. They would allow Catherine to begin incorporating the Queen Mother's pieces into her royal wardrobe gradually, building public familiarity with the idea that these treasures had found a new home. As they carefully placed each piece back in its protective setting within the jewelry box, both women felt the significance of what had just transpired. They had honored the wishes of a beloved queen and grandmother, but they had also taken the first steps in what might become a complex period of family adjustment and public scrutiny. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside reminded them that their private time was drawing to a close. Soon, other family members would begin arriving for the memorial service, and the intimate bubble they had created would necessarily expand to include others who might have different perspectives on what had just occurred. But, for now, Catherine held the jewelry box containing her precious new inheritance, feeling the weight of history and the warmth of love that had guided its passage from one generation to the next. These weren't just beautiful objects anymore. They were symbols of trust, investments in the future, and tangible connections to a woman whose wisdom and dedication had shaped the monarchy for 7 decades. As Zara prepared to leave Catherine alone with her new treasures, she offered one final piece of advice that her grandmother had shared in their last conversation. "Remember that every queen has faced moments when she doubted whether she was worthy of the role. The secret isn't feeling worthy. The secret is serving faithfully anyway." 3 hours after Zara's departure, the private memorial service at Windsor Castle brought together 3 generations of the royal family in the intimate St. George's Chapel. The autumn sunlight filtered through ancient stained glass windows, casting jeweled patterns across the stone floor where Queen Elizabeth II had worshipped for so many decades. Catherine sat beside William in the front pew, the weight of the Queen Mother's emerald earrings a constant reminder of the morning's extraordinary events. She had chosen to wear them for this first time at the memorial service, understanding that their debut needed to be in a setting that honored both the giver and the original owner. The earrings felt different than any jewelry she had worn before, heavier with history, more significant in their beauty. Every time she turned her head, she caught a glimpse of their sparkle in her peripheral vision, a constant reminder of the trust that had been placed in her. William had noticed them immediately when she joined him for the short drive from their private apartments to the chapel. His eyes had widened slightly in recognition, though he said nothing in front of their security detail and private secretary. But Catherine could see the questions in his expression, the mix of surprise and understanding that suggested he knew exactly what these earrings represented and where they had come from. The service itself was beautifully simple, exactly the kind of intimate gathering that Queen Elizabeth II had always preferred for personal occasions. Princess Anne delivered a heartfelt reading from Psalms, her voice steady and strong as she honored her mother's memory. King Charles spoke briefly about his mother's dedication to family, his words carrying special weight as he navigated his own first years as monarch. But it was Queen Camilla's presence that created an undercurrent of tension that Catherine couldn't ignore. Seated across the aisle, Camilla wore a stunning diamond and sapphire brooch that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth II, along with matching earrings that had been part of the late Queen's personal collection. She looked every inch the Queen consort, dignified and appropriately dressed for the solemn occasion. Yet Catherine couldn't help but wonder what Camilla might be thinking if she noticed the emerald earrings. Would she recognize them as pieces from the Queen Mother's collection? Would she wonder how Catherine had come to possess them? The questions created a knot of anxiety in Catherine's stomach, even as she tried to focus on the beautiful service and its purpose of honoring a remarkable woman's memory. Zara sat several rows behind with her husband Mike and their children, but Catherine could feel her supportive presence like a warm anchor in the midst of uncertainty. Zara's decision to fulfill her grandmother's wishes had been brave and loving, but Catherine was beginning to understand that she would now bear the responsibility for managing whatever consequences arose from that decision. After the service, the family gathered in the Waterloo chamber for a private reception, a tradition that allowed for more personal conversation and connection. The room, with its portraits of military heroes and elegant furnishings, provided an appropriately grand but intimate setting for the family to share memories and support each other in their continuing grief. Catherine found herself in conversation with Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, William's cousins who had always been warm and welcoming to her. But, even as they discussed the beauty of the service and shared fond memories of their grandmother, Catherine noticed Eugenie's gaze lingering on her earrings. "Those are absolutely gorgeous, Catherine," Eugenie said with genuine admiration. "I don't think I've seen them before. Are they new?" Catherine felt her heart rate quicken. She had prepared for this moment, knowing that questions about the earrings would be inevitable. "They're actually from the Queen Mother's collection," she said as calmly as possible. "A recent gift that I'm very honored to wear." Beatrice's eyes lit up with interest. "Oh, how wonderful! Grandmother always said the Queen Mother had the most exquisite taste in jewelry. It's lovely to see pieces from her collection being worn again." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of King Charles, who moved through the gathering with the practiced ease of someone who had spent decades navigating royal social events. He stopped to speak with various family members, offering comfort and sharing memories with his characteristic warmth and thoughtfulness. When he reached Catherine, his greeting was affectionate and sincere. But, as they spoke about the service and the family's ongoing adjustment to life without Queen Elizabeth II, Catherine noticed his gaze briefly settle on her earrings. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested recognition. As the monarch who would have been involved in decisions about the disposition of royal jewelry collections, he would certainly be familiar with significant pieces from the Queen Mother's estate. "Those emeralds are particularly beautiful," he said quietly, his comment carrying more weight than casual observation. "Grandmother would be pleased to see them being worn with such grace." Catherine felt a flutter of relief mixed with new concern. Charles's words suggested approval, but they also indicated that he knew exactly what she was wearing and understood the significance of her possession of these particular pieces. This knowledge would inevitably need to be addressed directly, but at least his initial reaction seemed positive rather than disapproving. William appeared at her side just as Charles moved on to greet other family members. "We need to talk," he said quietly, his tone suggesting urgency rather than anger. "Soon." Catherine nodded, understanding that the conversation about the morning's events could no longer be postponed. William would need to know everything about Zara's visit, the Queen's letter, and the full extent of what had been transferred to Catherine's care. More importantly, they would need to discuss how to handle the inevitable questions and potential complications that might arise. Across the room, Queen Camilla was engaged in conversation with Lady Sarah Chatto and the Duke of Gloucester, her manner gracious and appropriate for the occasion. She seemed completely unaware of any unusual dynamics or hidden tensions within the family gathering. Catherine wondered how long this ignorance would last, and what might happen when Camilla eventually learned about the jewelry transfer. As the reception continued, Catherine found herself studying the family dynamics with new eyes. She watched how different relatives interacted, how conversations flowed between generations, and how the absence of Queen Elizabeth II had shifted the balance of relationships within the extended royal family. The Queen had been the unifying force that held these complex personalities and competing interests together. Without her presence, new alliances and tensions were beginning to emerge. Zara approached during a quiet moment, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes conveying support and understanding. "How are you feeling?" she asked quietly, positioning herself so their conversation couldn't easily be overheard by others. "Grateful," Catherine replied honestly. "But also increasingly aware of the complexity of what we've done today." Zara nodded with understanding. Grandmother knew it wouldn't be simple. But she also knew that sometimes the right thing to do isn't the easiest thing to do. Their conversation was brief but meaningful, a moment of connection that reinforced the bond they had formed through their shared commitment to honoring Queen Elizabeth II's wishes. Catherine felt strengthened by Zara's confidence and support, knowing that she wasn't navigating this situation entirely alone. As the afternoon wore on, Catherine became increasingly conscious of the emerald earrings she wore. They were beautiful, certainly, but they had also become symbols of a new phase in her royal life. She was no longer just wearing jewelry for its aesthetic value or because it was appropriate for an occasion. She was now responsible for pieces that carried deep historical significance and complex family implications. The weight of this responsibility became even more apparent when she overheard a conversation between two longtime royal staff members who were helping with the reception service. They were discussing various pieces of the Queen Mother's jewelry collection, speculating about what had happened to certain famous pieces and wondering when they might see some of the more iconic items being worn again. Catherine realized that her possession of these pieces wouldn't remain a family secret for long. The royal household staff were knowledgeable about jewelry collections, often more so than family members themselves. They would notice when pieces appeared or disappeared from regular rotation. They would certainly notice when items from the Queen Mother's collection began appearing in Catherine's jewelry choices. This recognition led to another realization that made Catherine's stomach tighten with anxiety. The transfer of these pieces would need to be handled with absolute transparency and dignity. Any suggestion of secrecy or impropriety could damage not only her own reputation but also the memory of Queen Elizabeth II and the intentions behind her generous gift. William seemed to sense her growing concern because he appeared at her side once again, this time with a subtle suggestion that they prepare to leave. The reception was beginning to wind down naturally, with older family members starting to take their leave and younger relatives beginning to gather their children for departures. As they made their rounds saying goodbye to family members, Catherine was struck by the genuine warmth and affection that characterized these interactions. Despite the complex dynamics and potential tensions that existed within any large family, there was real love and mutual support among these people who shared the unique experience of royal life. Princess Anne's farewell was particularly meaningful. The Princess Royal had always been known for her direct manner and no-nonsense approach to royal duties, but she embraced Catherine with unusual warmth and spoke quietly about how proud her mother had been of Catherine's dedication to royal service. "Mother often spoke about your natural grace and your genuine care for others," and said, her words carrying the weight of someone who had known Queen Elizabeth II better than almost anyone. "She saw in you the qualities that she valued most in royal service." These words meant more to Catherine than any formal recognition or official acknowledgement could have. Coming from Princess Anne, who was notoriously sparing with praise, they represented a validation that went beyond jewelry or titles to touch on the essence of what royal service really meant. The drive back to their private apartments was quiet, with both Catherine and William lost in their own thoughts about the day's events. The memorial service had been beautiful and meaningful, a fitting tribute to an extraordinary woman's life and legacy. But Catherine's first public wearing of the Queen Mother's emerald earrings had also marked the beginning of a new chapter in her royal life, one that would require careful navigation and thoughtful decision-making. As they reached their residence, William turned to her with the serious expression she had learned to recognize over their years of marriage. "Now," he said simply, "tell me everything." The private sitting room in William and Catherine's apartment at Windsor felt like a sanctuary as Catherine carefully removed the Queen Mother's emerald earrings and placed them in their protective case. The weight of the day's events seemed to settle around them both as William loosened his tie and settled into his favorite armchair, his expression serious but patient. Catherine took a deep breath and began to recount everything that had happened that morning, from Zara's early arrival to the contents of Queen Elizabeth II's letter to the full extent of the jewelry collection that was now in her care. William listened without interruption, his face cycling through expressions of surprise, understanding, and growing concern as the full picture emerged. When Catherine finished her account, William sat quietly for several long moments, processing the implications of what his grandmother had done. As the future king, he understood better than anyone the delicate balance that governed royal family dynamics and the potential consequences of actions that might be perceived as favoritism or protocol violations. "Show me the letter," he said finally, his voice carrying the quiet authority that emerged whenever he needed to address serious royal business. Catherine retrieved the letter from her jewelry box and handed it to her husband, watching his face carefully as he read their grandmother's carefully chosen words. She could see him analyzing not just the content but the strategic thinking behind every sentence, understanding that Queen Elizabeth II had written this with full awareness of the complications it might create. "She really thought this through," William said when he finished reading, echoing Catherine's earlier observation. "Every possible angle, every potential consequence. This wasn't an impulsive decision or a simple gesture of affection." Catherine nodded, relieved that William seemed to understand the gravity and thoughtfulness behind his grandmother's choice. "But what do we do now? I mean, practically speaking. These pieces can't just sit in our safe forever, but wearing them publicly is going to raise questions." William set the letter aside and looked directly at his wife, his expression combining love with the weight of royal responsibility. "First, we need to understand what grandmother was really asking of us. This wasn't just about jewelry, Catherine. This was about her vision for our future reign and her confidence in your ability to represent the crown." The realization struck Catherine like a physical force. Queen Elizabeth II hadn't just been giving her beautiful jewelry. She had been investing in Catherine's authority as the future queen, providing her with symbols that would enhance her ability to represent the monarchy effectively. The Queen Mother's collection carried particular weight because of its association with one of the most beloved royal figures in modern history. She was preparing me, Catherine said softly, the understanding dawning fully. Not just giving me jewelry, but giving me tools for the role I'll eventually need to fill. William reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. Exactly. And that means we have a responsibility to honor her intentions, even if it means navigating some difficult conversations in the near term. They spent the next hour discussing the practical challenges they would face. The jewelry transfer would need to be documented officially, which meant involving the royal household's senior staff and, potentially, the monarch himself. King Charles would need to be informed about the full scope of what had occurred, both out of respect for his position and to ensure that there were no surprises that could damage family relationships. More delicately, they needed to consider how to handle the situation with Queen Camilla. While the jewelry transfer was completely legitimate according to Queen Elizabeth II's explicit wishes, it represented a significant deviation from what might normally be expected. Camilla had been gracious and patient in establishing her role as queen consort, and she deserved to be treated with respect and consideration as they navigated this situation. I think I should speak with Father first, William decided. He needs to understand the full context before anyone else becomes involved. And I want to make sure he knows that we're not trying to circumvent proper channels or create any division within the family. Catherine agreed, understanding that King Charles's support would be crucial for managing any potential complications. As the monarch, his blessing would provide legitimacy and help prevent the situation from becoming a source of family tension or media speculation. But, even as they made these practical plans, Catherine found herself grappling with deeper questions about her evolving role within the royal family. The jewelry transfer represented more than just a generous gift from a loving grandmother-in-law. It was a public declaration of confidence and expectation that carried significant weight. I keep thinking about the photographs, she admitted to William. All those iconic images of the Queen Mother wearing these pieces. How do I live up to that standard? How do I wear them in a way that honors her memory while still being authentic to who I am? William's expression softened with understanding. He had struggled with similar questions throughout his life, constantly aware that he was following in the footsteps of beloved and respected predecessors while trying to establish his own authentic approach to royal service. The Queen Mother wasn't trying to be Queen Victoria or Queen Mary, he reminded Catherine. She found her own way to serve while honoring the traditions she inherited. That's what grandmother is asking you to do with these pieces. Make them yours while respecting their history. As evening approached, Catherine carefully examined each piece in the collection again, this time not just as beautiful objects but as tools she would need to learn to use effectively. The sapphire necklace would be appropriate for state dinners and formal occasions. The emerald earrings could work for a variety of events, from charity galas to cultural celebrations. The pearl and diamond tiara would be reserved for the most significant occasions, times when the full weight of royal ceremony was required. But she also recognized that her choices about when and how to wear these pieces would send messages that extended far beyond fashion or tradition. Royal jewelry had always been a form of communication, a way to honor hosts, acknowledge occasions, and demonstrate the continuity of royal service across generations. The sound of their children returning from their own activities provided a welcome break from the intensity of their discussions. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis filled the apartment with the energy and laughter that always seemed to put royal responsibilities into perspective. As Catherine helped Charlotte with her homework and listened to Louis's excited account of his day, she was reminded of one of the most important aspects of Queen Elizabeth II's legacy. The late Queen had always understood that the monarchy's future depended not just on ceremony and tradition, but on the love and stability of strong families. The Queen Mother's jewelry collection would eventually become part of Charlotte's inheritance, pieces that would connect the young princess to her royal heritage while providing her with tools for her own future service. This intergenerational aspect of the gift added another layer of significance to what Queen Elizabeth II had done. Later that evening, after the children were settled for the night, William made the phone call to his father that they had discussed. Catherine could hear only one side of the conversation, but William's tone remained respectful and explanatory throughout. When he finished the call, his expression suggested that the conversation had gone better than they might have hoped. "Father wants to see us tomorrow," William reported. "He says he needs to understand the full situation, but his initial reaction was actually quite positive." He remembered grandmother discussing her concerns about the proper disposition of the Queen Mother's collection. Catherine felt a wave of relief, understanding that King Charles's support would be crucial for moving forward. If the monarch endorsed Queen Elizabeth II's decision, it would be much more difficult for anyone to question the legitimacy or appropriateness of the jewelry transfer. But William's next words introduced a new complexity that Catherine hadn't fully considered. He also said we need to think about timing for announcing this publicly. The palace communications team will need to prepare for questions, and will want to control the narrative rather than having it emerge through speculation or rumor. The idea of public announcement made the situation feel suddenly more real and more consequential. Catherine had been focused on family dynamics and personal responsibility, but the jewelry transfer would eventually become a matter of public interest and media coverage. Royal jewelry choices were always scrutinized by fashion experts, historians, and royal watchers who analyzed every detail for meaning and significance. When Catherine appeared in public wearing pieces from the Queen Mother's collection, especially items that hadn't been seen for years, the attention would be intense and the speculation inevitable. We'll need to be prepared for questions about why these pieces came to me rather than to Camilla, Catherine said, voicing one of her primary concerns. People will want to understand the decision-making process. William nodded, recognizing that this would indeed be one of the most sensitive aspects of any public discussion. That's why having father's support is so important. If he endorses grandmother's decision and explains the reasoning behind it, the questions become much easier to address. As they prepared for bed that night, Catherine carefully secured the Queen Mother's jewelry collection in their private safe, understanding that these pieces were now her responsibility to protect and preserve. But, more than that, they were symbols of the trust that had been placed in her and the expectations that would shape her future role. The emerald earrings had felt natural and right during the memorial service, as if they had always belonged to her. But Catherine knew that future occasions would require her to grow into the authority and confidence that these pieces represented. She would need to learn to wear them not just as beautiful accessories, but as symbols of royal service and continuity. The thought was both intimidating and inspiring. Queen Elizabeth II had seen something in Catherine that made her confident about this investment in the future. The challenge now would be proving worthy of that confidence while remaining true to her own authentic approach to royal duty. As sleep finally came, Catherine's dreams were filled with images of royal ceremonies and family celebrations, of herself wearing the Queen Mother's magnificent jewelry while surrounded by the love and support of the family that had welcomed her so completely into their extraordinary world. 6 weeks later, Catherine stood before her dressing room mirror at Buckingham Palace, fastening the Queen Mother's sapphire and diamond necklace around her neck for the first major state occasion since receiving the precious collection. Tonight's state dinner for the President of France would be her debut wearing one of the most recognizable pieces from the Queen Mother's jewelry treasury, and she could feel the weight of history and expectation settling around her shoulders along with the magnificent necklace. The intervening weeks had been a delicate dance of family diplomacy and strategic communication. King Charles had proven to be an invaluable ally, fully supporting his mother's decision and helping to navigate the complex conversations that followed. His meeting with William and Catherine had been warm and understanding, with the king expressing his own admiration for Queen Elizabeth II's thoughtful approach to ensuring the monarchy's future stability. The conversation with Queen Camilla had been more challenging, but ultimately successful thanks to Charles's careful preparation and Catherine's genuine respect for her stepmother-in-law's position. When Camilla learned about the jewelry transfer, her initial reaction had been one of surprise rather than anger. She had always understood that her role as queen consort came with certain complexities regarding inheritance and tradition. What had made the conversation easier was Catherine's sincere acknowledgement of Camilla's grace and patience in establishing her own relationship with the royal jewelry collection. Catherine had been careful to emphasize that this transfer represented Queen Elizabeth II's specific wishes rather than any reflection on Camilla's worthiness or status within the family. Camilla, for her part, had responded with the dignity and understanding that had characterized her approach to royal life throughout her marriage to Charles. She had even offered advice about wearing particularly significant pieces, sharing insights from her own years of representing the crown at formal occasions. The jewelry serves the role, not the other way around, Camilla had counseled during one of their private conversations. When you wear pieces with such history, you're not just accessorizing. You're carrying forward the legacy of remarkable women who served before us. The palace communications team had crafted a carefully worded announcement about the jewelry transfer, emphasizing Queen Elizabeth II's personal decision and her confidence in Catherine's future role. The statement had been released strategically, timed to minimize speculation while providing sufficient detail to satisfy public curiosity. Media reaction had been largely positive, with royal correspondents and fashion experts celebrating the return of iconic pieces to public view. The story had been framed as a touching tribute to Queen Elizabeth II's wisdom and a symbol of continuity within the royal family. Most importantly, there had been no suggestions of impropriety or family division. Tonight's state dinner would be the most visible test of how successfully they had managed the transition. The sapphire necklace was one of the Queen Mother's most photographed pieces, associated with countless memorable occasions throughout her long life. Catherine knew that every detail of her appearance would be analyzed and compared to historical images of the beloved Queen Mother. William appeared in the doorway of the dressing room, resplendent in his formal evening wear and medals. His expression combined pride and affection as he took in the sight of his wife wearing one of the most magnificent pieces in the royal collection. "You look absolutely stunning," he said, approaching to help her with the matching earrings. "But, more than that, you look like you belong in that necklace. Grandmother would be so proud." Catherine felt a surge of confidence at his words. Over the past weeks, she had been working with palace stylists and historians to understand not just how to wear these pieces effectively, but how to honor their significance while making them part of her own royal style. The sapphire necklace felt different than it had during her first private viewing with Zara. Then, it had seemed like a museum piece, beautiful but almost impossibly grand. Now, paired with a stunning navy evening gown and styled to complement her natural coloring, it felt like it had always been meant for her. As they made their way through the palace corridors toward the state dining room, Catherine reflected on how much had changed since that autumn morning at Windsor Castle. She had grown into the responsibility of owning these magnificent pieces, understanding that they were tools for representing the crown rather than just personal adornment. The formal presentation of guests provided Catherine's first public moment wearing the sapphire necklace. As she and William greeted the French president and his wife, she could sense the heightened attention from photographers and guests alike. The necklace caught the light magnificently, creating the kind of visual impact that had made the Queen Mother such an iconic figure. Throughout the evening's festivities, Catherine was conscious of the way the jewelry enhanced her ability to represent the royal family effectively. The pieces commanded attention and respect in ways that newer jewelry simply couldn't match. They carried the weight of history and the authority of generations of royal service. During dinner conversation with the French delegation, several guests commented specifically on the beauty and significance of her jewelry choices. Catherine was able to share stories about the Queen Mother's legacy while demonstrating her own knowledge of royal history and tradition. The pieces became conversation starters that allowed her to connect with guests on multiple levels. But perhaps the most meaningful moment of the evening came during a private reception before dinner, when Princess Anne approached Catherine with a warm smile and genuine appreciation in her eyes. "Mother would be absolutely delighted to see you wearing that necklace," Princess Anne said quietly, her typically reserved demeanor softening with emotion. She always said that the Queen Mother's jewelry needed to be worn by someone who understood service, not just ceremony. "You're exactly the right person for these pieces." Coming from Princess Anne, who had known both Queen Elizabeth II and the Queen Mother intimately, these words represented the ultimate validation of the late Queen's decision. Catherine felt tears threatening as she thanked Princess Anne, understanding that she had received approval from one of the most respected figures in the royal family. As the evening progressed, Catherine noticed how naturally she moved while wearing the magnificent necklace. The initial nervousness had faded, replaced by a growing confidence in her ability to carry the responsibility these pieces represented. She was no longer wearing someone else's jewelry, she was continuing a legacy that had been entrusted to her care. The media coverage following the state dinner exceeded even the palace's most optimistic expectations. Fashion magazines devoted entire features to Catherine's stunning appearance, while royal correspondents praised her growing confidence and natural elegance. Most significantly, the coverage consistently emphasized the continuity and stability represented by seeing the Queen Mother's jewelry worn with such grace by the future queen. International media picked up the story as well, with commentary focusing on the British royal family's ability to honor tradition while evolving with changing times. Catherine's wearing of the Queen Mother's pieces was seen as a symbol of institutional continuity that transcended individual personalities or political changes. In the weeks that followed the state dinner, Catherine began incorporating other pieces from the Queen Mother's collection into her royal wardrobe. The emerald earrings became a favorite for cultural events and charity galas. A delicate diamond bracelet proved perfect for daytime engagements. Each appearance built public familiarity with the idea that these treasures had found a new home with the future queen. The pearl and diamond tiara remained unworn, saved for the most significant occasions still to come. Catherine understood that when she eventually wore this most iconic piece, it would represent another milestone in her evolution as a senior royal figure. 3 months after that first private moment with Zara at Windsor Castle, Catherine sat in her private office at Kensington Palace, reviewing photographs from recent engagements where she had worn pieces from the Queen Mother's collection. Each image told a story of growing confidence and natural authority. A letter arrived that morning that brought tears to Catherine's eyes. It was from Zara, written on the anniversary of Queen Elizabeth II's birthday, sharing memories of their grandmother's joy and planning special surprises for people she loved. "She would be so proud to see how you've embraced this responsibility," Zara had written. "The jewelry looks beautiful on you, but, more importantly, you're wearing it with the grace and purpose she always hoped to see. You've honored her wishes in ways that go far beyond simply accepting her gift." Catherine carefully folded the letter and placed it in her private correspondence file, understanding that it would always be a treasured reminder of the love and trust that had made this entire journey possible. That evening, as she prepared for bed, Catherine looked at the Queen Mother's jewelry collection displayed in her private safe. These pieces had become more than beautiful accessories, they had become symbols of her growth as a royal figure and her commitment to serving the crown with dignity and purpose. The emerald earrings that had felt so weighty and significant during their first wearing now seemed like natural extensions of her royal wardrobe. The sapphire necklace had proven its power to enhance formal occasions while connecting her to royal history. Even the unworn tiara seemed to await its moment with patient confidence. As she closed the safe, Catherine reflected on Queen Elizabeth II's remarkable wisdom in orchestrating this transfer. The late Queen had understood that successful royal service required more than just following protocol or wearing appropriate clothes. It required confidence, authority, and the kind of deep connection to tradition that could only come from being entrusted with pieces that carried real historical weight. The jewelry had been Queen Elizabeth II's final gift to Catherine, but, more than that, it had been an investment in the monarchy's future. By ensuring that these magnificent pieces would be worn by someone who truly understood their significance, the Queen had strengthened the institution she had served for 7 decades. Catherine turned off the lights in her dressing room, understanding that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to serve the crown and honor the legacy that had been entrusted to her care. The Queen Mother's jewelry collection would continue to play its role in representing the royal family, but now it would do so in the hands of someone who had proven worthy of both the beauty and the responsibility these magnificent pieces represented. In the end, Queen Elizabeth II's decision had been vindicated not just by Catherine's graceful wearing of the jewelry, but by her growth into the kind of royal figure the monarchy needed for its future success. The pieces had found their perfect home, and the institution they represented had been strengthened by the wisdom of a queen who understood that true service meant preparing others to serve even better than she had herself.